Most people walk into a room and need something from it. Need it to accept them. Need it to respond. Need it to confirm they belong. That need, that quiet, invisible desperation, is readable from across the room. And the moment you're readable, you're manageable. There's a different kind of person. You felt them before you've heard them speak. They don't announce themselves. They don't perform. They simply are. And the room adjusts. That's not charisma. That's not confidence. That's what happens when someone has nothing left to prove. This is how you become that person. You think you're hiding it. You're not. Every room you walk into, every conversation, every meeting, every negotiation, someone is reading you. And not because they're perceptive, because you're making it easy. You are handing them the manual, page by page, without realizing you've even opened it. Here's what that looks like. You get asked a question you're not fully confident about, and instead of answering, you explain. You give context nobody asked for. You add justifications to a statement that didn't need defending. You talk past the point because somewhere in your nervous system, silence feels like exposure, so you fill it. Every extra word you add after the right stopping point is not information. It is a confession. It says, I don't trust what I just said. Do you? That's the over-explainer, and the room reads it in seconds. Then there's the reactor. Someone challenges you, your idea, your position, your presence, and you respond immediately. No pause, no space. You fire back before you've even processed what was said. You think that's confidence. It isn't. It's fear dressed up as assertiveness. The person who reacts instantly to every provocation is telling the room exactly which buttons exist and exactly how hard to press them. You've just handed over the controls. Thomas Shelby never handed over the controls. In any room, under any pressure, the man paused. Not because he was slow, because he understood that the first person to react is almost always the first person to lose. He decided what to show. He decided when to show it. The gap between what he felt and what he revealed. That gap was the weapon. You don't have that gap yet. And then there's the version of you that might be hardest to admit to. The approver. You're mid-conversation. You state a position. The other person pushes back. Not with logic, not with evidence. Just with disagreement. Just with a shift in their tone. And you soften. You start adding, well, I mean maybe, to things you were certain about 30 seconds ago. You're not open-minded. You're not reconsidering. You are managing their discomfort at the cost of your own credibility. And they can see it. Everyone can see it. The moment you adjust your truth based on someone else's reaction, you've told them exactly how to handle you in every conversation that follows. Readable, manageable, dismissible. Here's what matters. None of this is who you are. It is what you were taught. Somewhere along the way, you learned that silence is awkward, that pushback is dangerous, and that keeping people comfortable is your responsibility. You learned to perform transparency because you were rewarded for it. Rewarded with approval, with belonging, with the absence of conflict. But approval is a leash, and you've been walking yourself on it. These are trained behavior. Deeply grooved, yes. Automatic, yes. But trained. And what is trained can be examined. What can be examined can be changed. There are men who figured this out, not by reading a self-help book, by surviving. There is a name a lot of people know. Most know it because of the show, the accent, the flat cap, the violence and the mythology built around all of it. That's the surface. And if that's where you stopped, if Thomas Shelby is just a character you watched, then you missed the entire lesson. Look past the drama, strip away the setting. What remains is a specific kind of psychological architecture, a blueprint. And that blueprint is worth studying, not because it's entertaining, but because it works. In boardrooms, in negotiations, in the quiet moments where most people fold without realizing they've already lost. Start with silence. Most people treat silence as a gap to be filled, an awkward pause, a social failure. Shelby treated silence as an instrument, precise, deliberate, and deeply unsettling to anyone sitting across from him. He understood something most people never learn. The person who speaks first to break the tension has already revealed that the tension was affecting them. He never revealed that. He let the silence sit. He let it press against the other person until they started filling it themselves. And the moment they started filling it, they started losing. You cannot read a man who is comfortable with stillness. You can only wait for him to move, and he decides when that is. Then there is his emotional economy. Shelby did not broadcast his internal state. He did not leak. In any high-pressure moment, confrontation, negotiation, provocation, there was a visible gap between what he felt and what he showed. That gap is not coldness. It is discipline. It is the result of a man who made a private decision that his emotions are his own property, not public currency. Not something the room gets access to simply because they pushed hard enough. Most people's emotions are a live feed. Every feeling, frustration, anxiety, uncertainty shows up on their face in real time, available for anyone paying attention to use. Shelby made his feed private. He decided what aired, and because of that, nobody in any room could get ahead of him emotionally. They were always reacting to what he chose to reveal, never to what he actually felt. That is not a personality trait. That is a practiced discipline. And then there is his certainty. He did not enter rooms asking for permission with his posture. He did not soften his positions to manage other people's comfort. He did not hedge. He arrived at decisions privately, completely, and then simply stated them. No performance, no seeking of validation, just the clean, unnerving confidence of a man who had already finished the internal argument before the conversation began. That is what makes someone impossible to read. Not a mystery for its own sake, not coldness as a strategy, but genuine internal completeness. He was fictional, but the principles he embodied are not. They are as real as the results you're not getting right now. Here is the rule. Everything you say after the right stopping point is working against you. Not sometimes, every time. The moment your sentence ends and you keep going, adding context, adding justification, adding the explanation nobody asked for, you are no longer communicating. You are negotiating. You are trying to manage how the other person receives what you just said. And that management instinct, that compulsive need to control the landing, tells the room one thing with absolute clarity. You don't trust what you said. You don't trust them to receive it. And underneath both of those, you don't trust yourself. Every over-explanation is an apology in disguise. Every extra word is a bid for approval dressed up as information. Stop bidding. Here's what verbal economy actually looks like in practice. You make a statement. You stop. Not because you have nothing more to say, but because what you said was enough, and you know it. You let the silence follow. You do not rush to fill it. You do not soften the edges of what you just said, because the other person's face shifted. You said what you meant. You stopped. Now it is their turn. And if they are uncomfortable, that is not your problem to solve. This is not about being cold. It is not about being difficult. It is about understanding that the listener's discomfort with silence is their discomfort, not evidence that you said something wrong. Most people cannot do this, not because they lack intelligence, because they were trained from early on to keep talking until they received a signal that they were understood, accepted, approved. The talking was never really about communication. It was about comfort seeking. And comfort seeking in conversation is one of the most readable things a human being can do. The most effective men in any room, boardroom, courtroom, or otherwise, operated this way. Shelby understood it instinctively. Now understand the distinction, because this is where most people get it wrong. Verbal economy is not arrogance. Arrogance also uses few words, but for a different reason. Arrogance is dismissive. It cuts conversations short because it doesn't value the other person. That is not what this is. Confident brevity comes from a completely different place. It comes from a man who has thought clearly, decided firmly, and has no anxiety about how his words land. He is not performing detachment. He simply has nothing left to add, and he knows it. You can feel the difference when you encounter both. Arrogance leaves you feeling dismissed. Brevity leaves you feeling like you just heard something final, something that doesn't need a second coat. That is what you are building toward. Now here is what changes when you stop narrating. People start listening different. When you speak less, What you do say carries more weight, not because you've become more articulate, but because scarcity has value. When every word you produce is considered, the listener starts working. They lean in slightly. They sit with what you said, instead of waiting for you to keep going. You have made them an active participant instead of a passive receiver. And active participants remember what they heard. You also stop leaking. Every unnecessary word is a small exposure, a tell. When you strip narration down to what is necessary, you become harder to read, harder to anticipate, harder to manage ease. Say what needs to be said, then stop. Let the room carry the weight of it. That is not a communication style. That is authority. This is not about suppression. Get that out of your head immediately. This is not about becoming stone, not about cutting off what you feel or performing detachment you haven't earned. That approach doesn't work, and more importantly, it isn't the point. The people who try to suppress emotion entirely just become brittle, readable in a different way. You can see the effort. You can see the lid being held down, and that tension is its own kind of tell. What this is about is architecture. Architecture means you feel what you feel, fully, privately, and then you make a decision about what the room gets access to. You build a structure between your internal state and your external expression, not a wall, a gap, a deliberate, controlled space where you are the only one who decides what crosses over. Most people have no gap. What they feel moves immediately to their face, their voice, their posture. Frustration shows. Anxiety leaks. Uncertainty surfaces in the eyes before a word is spoken. They are not weak people. They are unarchitected people. Nobody taught them that the distance between feeling something and showing it is not coldness. It is control. And control, in any room, in any high-stakes moment, is the difference between leading and being led. Here is the whole technique. One thing, deceptively simple. The pause. In any moment where you feel the spike, the provocation, the challenge, the question designed to destabilize, you take one breath before you respond. One beat, not a dramatic pause, not a performance of contemplation. Just one breath that creates the space between stimulus and response. In that space, you make a decision. You decide what this moment gets from you. You decide how much of your internal state is relevant to what happens next. And then, and only then, you respond. That single breath is the gap. That is the architecture in its most practical form. Think about the last time someone rattled you. A comment in a meeting. A challenge to something you believed. A tone that was designed to diminish. What happened in your face? What happened in your voice? What did your body do before your mind caught up? What did you give away? And more precisely, what could you have held? Because here is what nobody tells you about emotional reactivity. It is not just a social liability. It is strategic information handed to the wrong people. Every time you react visibly, you are showing someone exactly what affects you, exactly how much, and exactly how fast. You are giving them a map, and they will use it. Not always maliciously, but they will use it. In every interaction that follows, reactive people are predictable. Predictable people are manageable. Manageable people do not lead rooms. They populate them. The goal is not to feel less. The goal is to become the person in the room who processes more, privately, cleanly, without broadcast, and reveals only what serves the moment. You are not a mirror. Stop reflecting everyone else's energy back at them. Start generating your own. That is what presence actually is. Not loudness, not performance. Just a person who has built the gap and lives in it. Listen to how you speak, not what you say. How you say it. Count the hedges. Count the qualifiers. Count every I think, every see, maybe, every kind of, every I'm not sure but that appears before a statement you actually believe. Count them honestly, because here is what every single one of those words is doing in real time. It is asking the room for permission to have the opinion you just expressed. It is saying, I have a position, but I'm not fully committed to it yet. Tell me if it's safe. Nobody follows a maybe. This is not a minor communication habit. This is a structural problem, because the room does not hear your hedges as humility. It does not hear them as openness or intellectual flexibility. It hears them as uncertainty, and uncertainty is contagious. The moment you signal that you're not fully sold on what you're saying, the people listening become unsold too. You have talked them out of believing you before you even finished the sentence. Here is the distinction that most people miss entirely. Certainty is not arrogance. They are completely different things, operating from completely different places. Arrogance needs the room to agree. Arrogance states a position loudly, then watches for approval, then doubles down harder when it doesn't come, because the approval is what it was really after. Arrogance is just insecurity with better posture. Certainty doesn't need the room at all. Certainty has already finished the internal argument. It arrived at a conclusion, privately, completely, without requiring an audience, and now it is simply stating that conclusion, not performing it, not defending it before it's been attacked, just stating it cleanly and then stopping. The room can agree or disagree. Either way, the position doesn't move without a genuine reason, not because of pressure, not because of discomfort, not because someone's tone shifted. That is what makes a room reorganize itself. Not volume, not aggression, not charisma in the theatrical sense, just the clean, unnerving quality of a person who has already decided, and whose decision does not appear to require your validation to remain standing. Shelby didn't ask rooms for permission. He arrived decided. The posture, the stillness, the economy of words, these were just the finishing details on something that had already been settled internally. Now apply this practically, because this is not abstract. Replace? I think we should probably consider with, here's what I'm doing. Not aggressive, not dismissive, just decided. Replace? Maybe this is wrong, but with the statement itself, stated plainly, followed by silence. Replace every apology that precedes an opinion with the opinion. The apology was never protecting anyone. It was protecting you from the discomfort of owning what you actually think. Own it. State it without scaffolding, without the emotional bubble wrap of hedges and qualifiers packed around it to soften the landing. Say the thing. Stop. Let it stand on its own. Here is what happens when you do this consistently. The room changes how it listens to you. Not immediately, but over time, something shifts. People stop waiting for you to finish and start actually hearing you mid-sentence. Because now every word you say feels load-bearing. Nothing is filler. Nothing is performance. Just a person who says what they mean and means what they say. That is not a communication upgrade. That is a different category of person entirely. At some point you found content like this. Videos, books, frameworks, the confident body language, the power poses, the vocal tonality exercises, the eye contact rules, the handshake techniques. You consumed it, maybe genuinely, maybe desperately, because something in you recognized that the way you were showing up wasn't landing the way you wanted it to, and so you started performing. Maybe you adopted a slower speaking pace because someone told you that powerful people speak slowly. Maybe you started holding eye contact 2 seconds longer than felt natural. Maybe you practiced the firm handshake, the measured pause, the deliberate walk. You assembled the pieces of what confidence looked like from the outside, and you wore them into rooms, hoping they would pass as the real thing. Here is the problem. It never fully works, and somewhere in you, you already know that. Performance is always detectable, not always consciously. The person across from you might not be able to name what feels slightly off, but something in their nervous system registers it. A micro-expression that doesn't match the tone. A pause that lands a half-beat too late to be genuine. A stillness that looks practiced rather than natural. The body has its own language, older than words, faster than thought, and it reads other bodies the way a native speaker hears a foreign accent. You don't have to know the rule to feel the violation. And the moment someone feels the performance, even subconsciously, they stop listening to what you are saying and start watching what you are doing. You have lost them, not loudly, not obviously, but completely. This is the ceiling that technique alone cannot break through, because presence is not a technique. It is not a collection of behaviors you can bolt onto an anxious interior and expect to hold. Presence is what remains When you stop needing the room to give you something. When you stop walking in with an invisible ask, validate me, accept me, confirm that I belong here, and start walking in with nothing to prove and nowhere to be other than exactly where you are. That shift is internal, entirely uncomfortably internal. It does not start with your posture. It does not start with your voice. It starts with a quiet, private decision that you are not auditioning, that this room, regardless of who is in it, regardless of the stakes, does not have the authority to define your value, that you arrived complete, and that whatever happens in the next hour, you will leave the same way. When that decision is made, genuinely made, not performed, everything else reorganizes around it. The posture corrects itself because there is nothing to protect. The voice steadies because there is nothing to sell. The eye contact holds because there is no anxiety driving it away. The silence becomes comfortable because you are not using conversation to manage your own internal state. You stop being a performer. You become a presence. And presence in a room full of performers is the rarest thing there is. People feel it before they understand it. They are drawn to it before they can explain why. Because what they are responding to, underneath all of it, is the radical relief of encountering someone who is not trying to be anything other than exactly what they are. The people who are impossible to ignore are almost always impossible to read, not because they are cold, because they are complete. You have been shown the blueprint, not a motivation, not a challenge, not a call to action, wrapped in urgency designed to make you feel like you need to move right now. Just the truth, laid out, clinical, without flattery or cushioning. And now it comes down to one thing, not a habit, not a routine, not a morning practice or a 30-day system. One decision, private, unannounced, made in the quiet between reading this and whatever you do next. The men and women who become impossible to ignore did not get there by studying how to be noticed. They did not optimize their body language or curate their silence or engineer their certainty from the outside in. They got there by arriving, internally, completely, at a single conclusion about themselves, that they were enough. Not perfect, not finished, not without damage or doubt, or the particular darkness that comes from having lived honestly in a difficult world. But enough, decided, no longer available for the slow erosion that comes from needing every room to confirm what they should have already known. Thomas Shelby did not walk into rooms hoping. He walked in knowing. And the difference between those two words is the entire distance between who you are right now and who this was written for. That distance is not closed by content, not by this, not by anything you consume or study or practice in front of a mirror. It is closed by a decision, one you make alone, one nobody witnesses, one that does not require an announcement, because the people around you will feel it long before you say a word. So the only question left is a simple one. Not, are you ready? Not, do you believe you can? Just this, have you decided?